We begin the day with how to win a war in Ukraine when the clock, the Russian military, and most likely the next U.S. president are all against you. When Russian forces began their full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, Kyiv was counting on support from U.S. President Biden in the form of money and weapons. More than 1,000 days and $60 billion later, Ukraine is bracing for all of that to change. In just 2 months, Donald Trump will return to the White House as U.S. president. It will mark the end of Joe Biden's time in office, and if Trump keeps his word, it will be the beginning of the end of America's aid to Ukraine. Trump won the election on a promise to spend money on America first and to end the war in Ukraine and to do it in 24 hours. Now, before that happens, in what appears to be some key last-minute policy shifts, U.S. President Biden has given the green light to Ukraine's military to use American ATACMS missiles inside Russia. And today, the U.S. said that it will supply Ukraine with anti-personnel landmines. Here's the U.S. Defense Secretary.
They're fabricating their own anti-personnel landmines right now. The landmines that we would look to provide them would be landmines that are not persistent. You know, we can control when they would self-activate, self-detonate, and that makes it far more safer eventually than the things that they are creating on their own.
Well, the Kremlin is accusing Biden of escalating the conflict, and with his presidency quickly ending, what can Biden do to make Ukraine more resilient against both Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump? We're going to talk about that. My first guest tonight is David Shlapak. He's a senior defense researcher at RAND. That's a U.S. policy think tank. He joins me tonight from Arlington, Virginia. David, it's good to have you on the program. These landmines, let me ask you about these first. They are what is termed non-persistent landmines. What does that mean?
Well, unlike the landmines that we're used to thinking about, that you put in the ground and they stay there forever until someone sufficiently skilled can remove them and take them away, non-persistent mines are designed to either detonate themselves after a period of time or to self-diffuse themselves after some period of time, so that they are much safer in the long run, as Secretary Austin said.
The decision by the U.S. to provide these mines to Ukraine, is that a sign that the battlefield situation for Ukraine is becoming increasingly desperate?
Well, I think that it's clear that Ukraine has been on the defensive and their battlefield position has been deteriorating in recent weeks. Landmines properly employed, anti-personnel mines properly employed, can be effective in helping maintain a defensive line, protect a defensive position, and potentially can slow an enemy's advance. They won't stop it. Mm-hmm. They aren't wonder weapons. They will, if used correctly, if covered by fire, which means having artillery or direct fire weapons that can engage targets that become entangled in the minefields, they can be very effective in slowing an adversary and in helping inflict loss on them. They won't stop it.
Reports say that Ukraine has also used a British Storm Shadow cruise missile against targets in Russia, and after the use of these U.S.-made ATACMS. Do we know how many of these weapons Ukraine has and how many would be needed to make a significant difference?
Well, we know that however many they have is not enough to make a significant difference. Press reports I've seen suggest that they have acquired on the order of 50 ATACMS. I don't have a number for Storm Shadow, but I'm guessing it's probably not much larger. Mm-hmm. These are weapons that were designed to be used by the dozen in an engagement. For example, the report I read said that 6 or 7 ATACMS were used in the attack on the Russian ammunition depot. Mm-hmm. That's sort of the number you need to be able to use in an attack against a particular target. These weapons are accurate, but they don't necessarily have a gigantic payload. So you need to use several of them to ensure covering the target area. So if Ukraine has 50 of one kind and 50 or 100 of another, that will be enough to engage targets. That will be enough to do some damage. That will be enough to inflict loss on the Russians. It will not be enough to dramatically reshape the battlefield.
These anti-personnel mines, the use of ATACMS, these are two major policy shifts for the Biden administration. Is this purely a response to the military situation, including Russian escalation by deploying North Korean troops, do you think?
I think it's a combination of the two things you talked about in your introduction. I think that there are concerns that the Ukrainian position is weakening on the ground, and that steps are needed to help reinforce their self-defense capabilities. And landmines certainly would be part of that. The ability to use interdiction fires against targets inside Russia would be part of that. But I think there's also concern that the incoming U.S. administration, at least based upon then candidate Trump's comments this summer and fall, will be more interested in achieving a quick end, or at least ceasefire in Ukraine, in the war between Russia and Ukraine, than in continuing to support Ukraine to the extent that the Biden administration has.
David Shlapak from the U.S. think tank RAND. David, we appreciate your time and your analysis tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy addressed a hearing of the U.S. Congress marking 1,000 days since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion. Now, the United States has played by far the largest role in military support for Ukraine. In the video address, Zelenskyy appealed for the aid to continue when Donald Trump takes over as president in January. Take a listen.
If the United States finds a way to make such strong, decisive choices, our strengths now and the strength of the entire free world for decades to come is possible thanks to the incredible support of the United States, millions of Americans united against evil. Thank you for this.
All right, I want to bring in Bradley Bowman now. He's with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Brad, it's good to see you again. First things first, do you think Donald Trump will end military aid for Ukraine come January?
I would like to say no, but I can't say that confidently. And as an American who believes it's a wise investment and not charity for us to help the people of Ukraine to defend themselves against this naked aggression, it pains me to say that. But if you listen to what President-elect Donald Trump is saying, I cannot be confident about what the future of U.S. assistance to Ukraine will look like. I worry that he's going to be so eager to make a deal that he might limit or deprive Ukraine of the means that it needs for self-defense.
Do you think, let me just ask, while we're talking about the end of the war, do you think that that's going to mean Ukraine giving up part of its territory?
Well, Russia currently controls a large portion of Ukrainian territory, Crimea, as well as large sections of the Donbass and elsewhere. And so, if you stop the war where it currently stands, then you have Russian military forces occupying large portions of Ukraine. And I think one would reasonably conclude that that is some sort of victory for Russia. Someone might respond by saying, well, they lost hundreds of thousands of lives in the process. But Vladimir Putin doesn't care about Russian lives. This is a war of imperialist aggression for him, and he will have changed effective international borders by force. And if that sounds like the first half of the 20th century, it should.
The U.S. State Department says that America has provided $64.1 billion of military aid to Ukraine in the past 2 years. Where is that money being spent?
Yeah, no, the numbers from the Department of Defense as of November 20th is $61.3 billion, close to your number, in security assistance provided to Ukraine. That's come in two primary forms: Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative; those are contracts for new weapons, and then a Presidential Drawdown Authority, where we provided Ukraine weapons from the American arsenal, which are later replaced. That money, that's got a B word, billion. It sounds like a lot, but actually, in the scope of the American defense budget, it's actually kind of tiny. By our statistics, as of September 30th, that $61.3 billion is roughly 2.8% of what the United States spent on the Pentagon over the same time period. So by my count, that's a bargain. We're dealing body blows to the second leading conventional threat we confront. We're helping Ukraine continue to exist, and we're sending a positive deterrent message to Beijing.
About half of the money, the aid, has come, as you were mentioning, from existing U.S. military stockpiles. Are defense contractors, are they going to be kept busy repleting those stocks, even if Donald Trump ends support for Ukraine?
Yes. One of the silver linings of Putin's horrific large-scale reinvasion on February 24, 2022, is it highlighted for Americans that our arsenal of democracy, the means by which we help other democracies under threat defend themselves, was not what it used to be, and that we've allowed it to erode significantly. So that provided a wake-up call, and we've been taking very positive steps since then. And unfortunately, there's large demand for American weapons around the world right now, in the Middle East and in Asia. So I'm not concerned about demand for our defense industrial base. I'm concerned that we don't have the production capacity we need. And part of that is that we're spending near World War II lows as a percentage of GDP on defense, only 3%. The only time we spent less than that by that measure was 1940, before we entered World War II, and the years immediately preceding 9/11.
Wow. So you don't think there's any nervousness among contractors about orders dropping off?
No, and that's not really my focus. My focus is helping the free people of Ukraine continue to be free, and the means by you do that is providing them the means of self-defense. And unfortunately, the world is as dangerous as it's been since 1945, according to the bipartisan, congressionally mandated National Defense Strategy Commission. So I'm not worried about demand, unfortunately, for weapons contracts.
Let's look at Donald Trump for a moment. He has railed against what he calls warmongers during his campaign. He railed against lobbyists from the arms industry ahead of the 2016 election. But what does his record from his first term in office tell us, Brad?
During Trump's first term, we conducted an extraordinary amount of foreign military sales, some of the highest we'd seen in years. And I think that is a good thing, because that helps lessen the security burden on the United States. And the Biden administration has largely continued or expanded on that. So I don't think it's warmongering to provide partners, Democratic allies and partners, the means of self-defense that helps them defend themselves, more capably operate with us, and reduces our security burden. So I think that's a good thing. Trump did a lot, and I think he'll do even more in his second term.
And just before we let you go, do you think that spending on defense, do you think we're going to see a sizable increase? I mean, do you think it's going to be important now that Trump has won the election? It's going to be important to him to, increase spending a la Ronald Reagan? Yes. We spent about Reagan at the height of the Reagan buildup spent about 6% of GDP on defense. We're spending 3% now. I think national security job number one for Trump is to increase defense spending and fast, because fielded combat capabilities, not defense spending, deters in war and win war. And it takes time to field capabilities. So we better get going. Our adversaries on war footing, and we're not, and we better wake up. Bradley Bowman with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Brad, as always, we appreciate your time and your valuable analysis. Thank you.
Thank you.